Hello, all. Good morning. Hope you can see me and hear me, all of you. Yes, Trisha, good morning. Let's see if some more people come in. Hello. Okay, right. Uh, so yesterday we were halfway through discussing sailing to Byzantium, Yeats rather. So we were dealing with sailing to Byzantium, and Byzantium, the companion pieces typifying many of the poems of Yeats's maturity. I had mentioned yesterday that he had read Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire and had been profoundly influenced by it. Yeats revered the age when aesthetic and practical life had been one and undivided, and the entire Byzantine era seemed to him as a thing ethereal and sensuous at once. It was a very healthy combination of sunshine, spirituality, artistry, creativity. It was everything merging into a unified whole. He believed in his own state of mental and intellectual finesse. He believed that just giving in to the calls of the flesh simply led to death and decay. And unfortunately, human beings, particularly the country which he was willing to leave, they were too involved, too engaged with the pleasures of the flesh and pleasures of the flesh that is brought on by the young age. And this particular country, which says that this is no country, that is no country for old men, they only limit themselves to the pleasures of the body, the physical pleasures, and while the body is young, they do not honor, they do not value the the process of maturing, of enriching one's life as one advances through life. Mind you, having said that, in both the poems, I'll just share the slides with you. And he says that it's much better to immortalize oneself. I can age, I can look for eternity through art, through my creation. Now, when we talk of age and mortality, let me share this slide. Tied to the body, to the decaying the body at all, this dying animal, because I am more than this. I'm much more than just my body, which is decaying, which is growing old, because my mind is fresh, my mind is still going, and nobody can kill it off. There is no there is no decay of my mind, there is no decay of my spirit, there is no decay of my creativity as long as I do not allow it. I acknowledge that my mind is fresh, my soul is fresh, my creativity is fresh, and I maintain it, I retain it. And if the place, in this case, he's calling this country, if this country doesn't allow, I shall go on to, I shall sail, I shall take a metaphorical journey. Rather, it's almost like a journey of maintaining his soul, a journey of protecting, nurturing his soul in order to indulge in more creativity, in order to indulge in and aid more creativity. And through the process, he simply immortalizes his spiritual existence. And in the process of creating art to immortalize himself, if he allows his physical existence to freeze into a work of art, so be it. It's much more appreciable than to just die both physically and mentally. my work will stay on, my creativity will stay on. So escape the physical limitations of old age by beautifying their souls, nurturing their souls, further honing his spiritual skills, spiritual abilities, and eventually, upon dying, becoming something that isn't tied to the human body at all. I've gone beyond that. The poem thus implies a separation between body and soul and presents old age as both a burden as well as an opportunity. Old age is basically opening a door. The older you become, the more you explore your possibilities, your spiritual and creative possibilities. So it's an opportunity for a kind of spiritual transcendence, a chance to leave the earthly world and all its limitations behind and go beyond, to transcend, to rise above. Now, Yeats was often called an apostle of antinomies, that is, contradictions. As a youth, Yeats perceived himself as a physically frail to a degree approaching invalidism. Now, I had mentioned Maud Gonne in his life, who was his muse, who was a huge inspiration, and Yeats was quite obsessed with her for a long, long time. She was a very beautiful woman, but she was a political activist and she was an incredibly strong woman who refused to marry him. And she actually told him that my absence is the inspiration for your beautiful creative work. Had I married you and stayed with you, probably it would have fizzled out. But at the same time, Yeats responded to that perception that he was very frail. He was physically frail, he had health issues, with profound admiration for those who possessed talents and capabilities that he lacked, which Maud God had. He found that counter image in his vigorous and daring grandfather, his mother's father, William Pollexfen, and during adolescence he was friend and admirer of his athletic and courageous schoolmate, Cecil Vesey. But it was Yeats's relationship as a young man with the beautiful and aggressive Maud Gonne that provided the most striking examples of his search for wholeness through identification with an opposite. Maud Gonne was exactly the opposite of what he was not. He was, Maud Gonne probably saw him as too sensitive, too emotionally frail with all his sensitivities to become a partner of hers. And she knew that if they get together, she would kill off his creativity. And at the same time, she would be trapped. They wouldn't be making a very healthy whole. But Yeats was very, very attracted to Maud Gonne, and he proposed marriage to her several times. But it was failed attempts. She always rejected him. She wanted to remain his friend, but not his wife, not his partner. He was dissatisfied with his quotidian, that is, daily normal self. He still needed an opposite to make him whole. The opposite he supplied through his individualized intellectual achievement, the concept of the mask. He always thought that this, the mask, shows me as what I am not. And in order to, and by doing that, it makes me whole. It combines my frailty as well as my wishful thinking of somebody being somebody else. So my mind began drifting vaguely toward that doctrine of the mask, which has convinced me that every passionate man is, as it were, linked with another age, historical or imaginative, where alone he finds images that raise his energy. So the same thing, if we draw an analogy there, you can see he's growing old, he is becoming more and more frail, his physical condition or man's physical condition in general might be detrimental to his to the way he to his desired existence, but he can always imagine and create another world which is quite opposite to what he is into now, and make his existence a whole. So he travels, he sails to Byzantium. This entire sailing exercise is a journey by which he nurtures and explores his creativity. He goes to Byzantium, where he will be able to, which will allow him to be what he cannot find in his current situation. There is creativity, there is an opportunity to be immortal. His current place does not allow him immortality. It only reminds him that he's too old to be here, because this is only this place where he's living now, which he wants to leave, is only for the youth who are enjoying their present. They are indulging in earthly pleasures, in mortal pleasures, and they know that they will decay and die, or die and decay, just as the fish do, just as the youth who are, the young people who are indulging in some sort of intimacy or giving in to the pleasures of the youth. They do not look beyond their current situation, but I do. And I want the other situation to be part of my existence in order to make me whole. Not only that, it'll make me immortal. So he resolved to derive images from that other world to adapt them within his own mind and to make them a part of his own nature and spirit. By such a process, Yeats endeavored to find within himself another Yeats. He aspired to be self born and born anew. He sought, therefore, thenceforth, through an act of will, to attain that personal unity and wholeness which till now has evaded his almost frantic pursuit. Right now, he's not part of that other world, but he wants to take on that journey. He will exert himself to go through that journey into the other world, which will make him whole, which will not leave him lacking in anything. And reflections on old age, death, and immortality. Yeats was always aware of the fragility of life. He used to think it's just a mouthful of air. And the threat of death was intensified by lifelong physical frailty. During his last 12 years, he experienced a series of illnesses, each of which brought him near death. And he regarded old age as an enemy, and death represented a menace of greater proportions. Why? It is not just death, that it's the end of life. No, it's almost cutting him short, putting an abrupt stop to all his capabilities, old age and death, that I'm capable of doing a lot more, I'm capable of creating a lot more, I'm capable of leaving a lot more for posterity. But old age is such a debilitating condition, and death is such an abrupt end to everything, that I leave a lot of things undone. And hence, I want to escape this atmosphere, this ambience, which only pays homage to young age, to youth. That only acknowledges the the existence of whatever a young person does, and they as they, and this particular country, as they look at old men, they kind of, they, it becomes dismissive towards old age, which Yeats himself did. So he wanted to combine, move away from that kind of sentiment and combine old age, retain his creativity, combine old age with immortality attained through creativity. So old age imposed physical disabilities, but death held potential for dissolution, total, and he said, I will win, I shall conquer death. I shall not allow death to be victorious. I shall, or not only that, I shall not let death scare me or intimidate me, because I can look death in the eye and tell him, you will not, you are not in power. I am in power over you because I go beyond death, because I go, my creativity, my inner self, my spirit, my soul will be alive forever. So you are not the absolute power over me. You do not have absolute power over me. You might think that I have finished him off, he's no more. But I am definitely there. I am a lot more than old age and death. He had spent the better part of a lifetime evolving a psychologic device that strove for victory in time of crisis by supplanting weakness resulting from innate personal deficit and strength derived from an antithetical self engendered through exercise of the will and imagination. This is what I'm saying, that he takes on the challenge of old age and death and says that my imagination will allow me, my will allow me, my creativity, my soul, my spirituality, or my spiritual strength will allow me to go beyond you all. He was not one to accept annihilation at the fate as the fate of that will and imagination, particularly not when he was convinced as he approached the end of his life that he was more complete, more his own opposite than he had ever been before. That I'm not frail, I'm not ill, I'm not approaching death. Here I am, more than all that man is scared of. So his responses to the challenges of old age and death were intrinsic to and originated from the concept of the mask. Not only does the mask hide the fear, the mask also helps him confront the threats of old age, death, and the mask will remain. Could be a mask of immortality, could be a mask of something that cannot be changed. The human face might become wrinkled, old age. The mask will remain exactly the same. And also, the mask allows him to be what he's not, or kind of adds another dimension to his existence. Then we come to Easter 1916. It was written by Yeats to commemorate the Easter Rising in 1916, in which Irish nationalists led a rebellion. Mind you, Maud Gonne was very politically active, and she was, uh, she was arrested a few times. She was kept in jail. She she suffered a lot of personal losses. She went into a lot of some meaningful, some not so meaningful relationships, but she was a very strong presence in the political arena of Ireland. So Irish nationalists led a rebellion to win independence from British rule. One second. What's this? Thus, even as he registers the rebels, okay. Now, what happens is during this uprising, the leaders of the rising were ultimately executed, and Yeats's poem, some of them were quite well known to Yeats, and there was a sense of loss. There was a sense of glory. There was definitely the horror of the execution. There was the horror of the torture, arrest and torture, and finally execution. Also, the upheaval, the upsetting was of what was there. That created a tremendous amount of stir. So, Easter is really the time of regeneration, resurrection, rising from the dead. So, here the speaker, the poet, is conflicted about the value of sacrificing everything for the sake of a public cause. It's almost an allusion to Jesus dying for putting his life down to save mankind. The thing is, sometimes he actually seems to regret the personal. Now, what were those people? He did. He said that in the poem he says that I knew them as somebody else. Somebody could be a poet. Somebody could be just a happy-go-lucky chap. They were all into other things, and suddenly, when they participated in this uprising, in the Irish the rebellion, another aspect of their character came out. A lot of us did not know that they were capable of such glorious work, such so much of strength, mental strength, so much of will, strong will, so much of devotion to the goal. Or we didn't know that this same simple person who could be drinking beer in a pub or just writing poetry or just leading a very normal life, that he led a parallel life, a secret life where he was part of a rebellion. So he also suggested the total. Now, these people, why did they die? They put their life down because they believed in a cause, because they believed that they could free Ireland from the British rule, just as people did in India during our independence movement. So many young people, old people, not so young people, they put their lives down. They sacrificed their entire life, their families, their comforts, everything to win independence for their country. But he seems to question that such total devotion to a cause can make a person lose their sense of human feeling and judgment. They are almost robotized by this, by their ism, by their political beliefs. They are almost, he feels that it's almost like they've been brainwashed into feeling that, into thinking and believing, rather, more than feeling, believing very strongly that everything else is not worth anything. Just focus on this goal, fight for your country, put your life down, get arrested, get tortured, it doesn't really matter. But you don't really need to think of those who are associated with you. Could be your family, your wife, could be your children, parents, brother, sister. Takes their mind off everything else. Thus, even as he registers the rebels' heroism and bravery, he firmly acknowledges the costs of their commitment. At what cost? What are you giving up to focus on this goal? Yes, you have become heroes, you've been executed, you've become martyrs, you've become great in the eyes of the common man. But what have you lost, or rather, what have those who were associated with you lost? Does the sacrifice made by you in your personal life, or the sacrifice made by those associated with you in your personal life, Do they ever get highlighted? People can sing your glory, people can immortalize you in songs and ballads and commemorate and honor you, everything. But was it really worth it? So while becoming heroes, they may have lost some of their humanity as well as their lives. They've almost become non-human beings, stones. So the speaker also suggests that total commitment to a cause, while honorable, can exclude a person from normal human life and cloud their judgment. Yes, if you're brainwashed that put your life down for your motherland, it's a very noble thought. It's a very noble thought. But it can also, especially if they're very young, it can cloud their judgment. Their minds can be manipulated. Initially, the speaker seems to applaud the rebels' dedication by noting they have hearts with one purpose alone, but then says that such single minded dedication can make a stone of the heart, that can make your heart cold, unfeeling. You can sacrifice everything, everybody, and their feelings in order to proceed in your chosen path, making them unable to care about ordinary human life, which is also very valuable. And the speaker depicts this ordinary life metaphorically with a scene from nature, where the moorhens dive and hens to moorcocks call. They represent human life's most basic emotions and events: hunger, love, sex, birth, enjoyment of company. So he seems to raise these questions that isn't an ordinary life just as good than removing your mind from taking your mind off from everyday ordinary life and just focusing on one goal. So the stone doesn't share in any of these things, but simply exists in the midst of all, an indifferent, cold, unfeeling existence. The stone also does not change. Everything else, horse, birds, living stream, changes constantly. In not changing, the stone is more dead because everything that is live will change. But the stone has no life. So you, in your dedication, have almost been converted into a piece of stone. Your heart has become cold. Your entire existence has become cold and you are manipulated. You've almost been converted into a non human being. So everything else, horse, birds, the living stream, changes constantly. Not changing, the stone is more dead than alive. This image suggests the rebels, too, even before losing their lives, they died in a sense. They allowed their mind to die. They allowed their sensibilities, the sensitivities to die by losing their human feeling. You've almost been robotized. You have decided consciously, or you've been manipulated to put everything aside and put your mind to one thing, that is the liberation of your country. Their excess of love for their single purpose may have bewildered them, blinding them about how best to act. It's almost like you're leading a blinkered life. You don't even look anywhere else. You don't even look at anybody else. Ultimately, the poem does not decide whether for the rebels the political gain outweighs the personal loss. The refrain, "A terrible beauty is born," registers both the rebels' noble devotion to their cause and the devastating price they paid for it, as well as the speaker's uncertainty about how to make sense of all this. Was this really needed? Was this dehumanization really needed? Was this what you were born for? This complete uh, removal from human existence, human feelings, human sensibilities. Is it all worth it? He doesn't answer the question, but he leaves the question open. So there are doubts about how to commemorate those who have died for a cause. Should commemoration comfort those who are mourning or force them to face the harsh reality of death? He's looking at the other people who've been left behind. Should the dead be honored only if people know that what their sacrifice achieved? Though the speaker initially asks whether the rebel sacrifice was necessary at all to reach their goal, there could be other ways, not such absolutely trigger happy ways of attack, kill, or get killed. So, though the speaker initially asks whether the rebel's sacrifice was necessary to reach their goal, he ultimately rejects that question. He concludes that the appropriate way to commemorate the dead is to honor and remember them without deciding whether they made the right choice or knowing what that choice achieved. That's all. Just creating an awareness of what they did for you. I'll just take a 2 minute break. Right. Then we come to the second coming. I do not know if I'll be able to finish all. Uh, Now, in this second coming, Yeats believed in historical cycles. The birth of Christ, therefore, not being a unique phenomenon, was something that must recur. There are revelations of this belief in the second coming. The eternal powers can only find satisfaction in the dramas played out under their own inspiration and influence. The beginning of the Christian era meant for Yeats the defeat of the Greek doctrine of measure and flooding the world with what Neoplatonist philosophers call the fabulous, formless darkness. In Yeats's eyes, this darkness belongs to Asia, where miracle is substituted for reason. Nearly 2000 years having passed since Christ and the world, as suggested in the second coming, is ripe for another equally significant and violent revolution in the human world. So second coming is often called a prophetic poem. It's almost a foreboding that Christ was born to heal, to make the world a better place, and he put his life down to do that, to save humanity. And then at the end of it, when the time is right, he would come back again. There will be the good will be rewarded, the bad would be punished. The good, dead or alive, would be rewarded. The bad would be punished. A day of reckoning will be there. Apart from the parable conventions, the poem is a sinister and why is it a sinister and direct prophecy of imminent disaster? Poems of this kind we have seen in T.S. Eliot as well. That this particular kind of poems, which is foreboding doom, have been written by many people, including Auden, including Eliot, D.H. Lawrence. But Yeats differs from them all. He implies that even the coming anarchy has its place in a pattern, and he does not really expect the triumph of flux in apparent in the strong movement of the verse. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the faulkner rather. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack of all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So, best of them, they have lost their conviction, they've lost their faith. The violent phrase blood dimmed tide has variously been interpreted by critics. Stephen Spender considered it a reference to the coming of fascism. Yeats might not have meant this prophecy so precisely, yet the gruesome tide does represent the upsurge of instinctive violence when other outlets are cut off and barred, finds a natural outlet in fascist mob mania. Thing is, there is a prediction for bloodshed, for anarchy, for lack of order, for human cruelty, for the suffering, tremendous amount of suffering of the common man, simply because he feels probably the lessons of Christ have not really been effective, because we human beings, what the only thing that we have done is to go through time creating more and more ways and devices and convoluting our minds, twisting our minds into creating means of destruction. We haven't really salvaged ourselves. We haven't really seen or tried to become better people. It's just gone wrong, it's just gone the other way. He felt that perhaps this would give the individual freedom, for he never made the idea of freedom contingent on democracy. His ceremony of innocence is weirdly juxtaposed with this nihilistic trend. This nihilistic trend is something that he felt very intensely. It'll be a complete chaos, it'll be a complete doom. He began writing the poem in January 1919 in the wake of the First World War, the Russian Revolution, and political turmoil in his native Ireland. But the first stanza captures more than just political unrest and violence. Its anxiety concerns the social ills of modernity. That man hasn't really become a better person, or he hasn't really created a better world. The rupture of traditional family, societal structures. There is this extreme, scary indifference in man. There is no willingness to make the world a better place. There is no willingness, no keenness to improve or build upon anything negative. So the values were decaying, faith was decaying, and what and there was immense amount of insecurity brewing. So what do these things give birth to? Insecurity, decaying of value, decaying of moral, the rupture or the collapsing of family values or relationship values. Everything leads to the creation of a monster, the loss of collective religious faith, and with it, the collective sense of purpose. It's all lost. People are simply moving around like, I wouldn't call them headless chickens, but they've lost the purpose of life. The feeling that the old rules no longer apply and there's nothing to replace them. That is the main thing. That the old rules do not apply, but what do we have to bring in their place? Nothing. 20th century history did turn more horrific after 1919, as the poem forebodes. The narrator suggests something like the Christian notion of a second coming is about to occur. And rather than earthly peace, it will bring terror, as for the slouching beast, which has the body of a lion and the head of a man. If you think of Nrishing avatar, it's a half lion, half man, although it's the other way around. It's got the body of a human and the head of a lion, but it's extremely cruel. The way he kills his enemy, Hiranyakashipu, is extremely cruel. And this beast is slouched, looking at the east as if about to take a plunge. It will bring terror. Instead of bringing earthly peace, it will bring terror. As for the slouching beast, the best explanation is that it's not a particular political regime or even fascism itself, but a broader historical force comprising the technological and ideological and the political. Everything will have its effect on bringing on something negative, simply because we've all become islands within ourselves. See, the second coming presents a nightmarish apocalyptic scenario. As the speaker describes human beings, it's an all destructive scenario. Beings' increasing loss of control and tendency towards violence and anarchy. Surreal images fly at the reader thick and fast, creating an unsettling atmosphere that suggests a world on the brink of destruction. So there was going to be a world war, there was going to be more killing, the Holocaust. Basically, human values were diminishing and disappearing. Hence, people were very indifferent when millions of Jews were killed in the Holocaust. The rest of the world, for months and months it went on, the rest of the world sat indifferent. Yet, for all its metaphorical complexity, the Second Coming actually has a relatively simple message. It basically predicts that time is up for humanity unless something is done very quickly. And that civilization as we know it is about to be undone. Everything that human beings have created with beauty, with spirituality, with everything, it's just going to disappear, going to be cruelly destroyed. Mindless destruction, mindless violence. Yeats wrote this poem right after World War One and a global catastrophe that killed millions of people. Perhaps it's surprising then that the poem paints a bleak picture of humanity, suggesting that civilization's sense of progress and order is only an illusion. We might be talking about it, we might be lecturing about it, we're not practicing it. Nobody is. So the first stanza's challenging imagery starts to make more sense. The falconer, representing humanity's attempt to control its world, has lost its falcon in the turning gyre. Gyre is an image Yeats uses to symbolize grand, sweeping historical movements as a kind of spiral. So the eagle is flying around, round and round, and these first lines could also suggest how the modern world has distanced people from nature, represented here by the falcon. So nature has been distanced, and human beings themselves are responsible for that. In any case, it's clear that whatever connection one might once linked in the metaphorical falcon and falconer has broken, and now the human world is spiraling into chaos. That is the sad part. Excuse me. So, the current state of the world, according to the speaker, proves that the center, that is the foundation of society, was never very strong. It's collapsing. So, if the center cannot hold, indeed, the poem suggests that though the humanity might have looked, it was almost like the entire humanity was living under an illusion over the past 20 centuries that ever increasing knowledge and scientific, yes, in the physical world there's been scientific developments, the ever increasing knowledge, there've been researches, there've been discoveries, there've been travels, but the first world war proved people to be as capable of self-destruction as ever. Anarchy was loosed upon the world, along with tides of blood which clearly evoked mass death of war, mass killings, mass deaths. And the saddest part is that beings are killing other human beings. So, where is knowledge and discovery, which is all supposed to be for the good of humanity? Where is it leading us? Scientific discoveries are being used to kill others for mass killing. The more sophisticated the discoveries, the greater the mass killings are, as we will see, as we have seen in the Second World War. Innocence was just a ceremony now drowned. Innocence is ceremony, it was just a ritual that the human beings are innocent, clean people, anything but. The best people lack conviction, which suggests they are not bothering to do anything about this nightmaring reality. Like, they don't have the willingness to stop this kind of bloodshed. They are not convinced enough to go forward and put a stop to it. And the worst seem excited and eager for more destruction. It's not a big deal for them. And the current state of the world, according to the speaker, proves that the center was not strong. It cannot hold. The foundation, the very base of society, was not very strong. So it cannot hold. It's collapsing. It's crumbling. And the worst people, they keep on doing the keep on performing evil deeds. And the best people, well, their convictions, their own beliefs in doing anything good or human goodness is not strong enough to prevent them. In other words, humanity's supposed arc of progress has been an illusion. Whether the poem means that humanity has lost its way or never knew it to begin with is unclear. But either way, the promises of modern society of safety, security, and human dignity have proven empty. Because if there is any belief in human dignity, if there is any faith in security and safety, all this wouldn't have happened. And in their place, a horrific creature has emerged. There is no Christ coming back. Instead, there is this beastly creature has emerged, a grotesque perversion of the second coming promised by Christianity. So there is no Christ coming really. Instead, there's a destructive beast slouching to take a plunge, to wreak more havoc. This second coming is clearly not Jesus, but instead a rough beast that humanity itself has woken up. Perhaps the first stanza implies by the incessant noise of its many wars. So it is really it's a picture of doom. It's a picture of destruction, demolition of anything that we have been thinking all these years, like when he's writing, that whatever happens, the good will always come forward to prevent the bad from happening. It is not happening anymore. The second coming is really could be the second coming of terror or Antichrist as such. With this final image of the beast, the poem indicates that while humanity seemed to get more civilized in the 2000 years that followed Christ's birth, in reality, people have been regressing. They have been going back, have been sowing seeds of their own destruction all along. And this rough beast is now pitilessly slouching toward the birthplace of Jesus, probably likely in order to usher in a new age of darkness and nightmare, horror, with a sort of cold cruelty, cold indifference, lack of empathy, just as a lion would kill without thinking of a lion would just kill. It has a cold apathy towards how the victim feels. It just does it for its own fulfillment, whether it's hunger or if it feels threatened, it'll just kill. So the human beings are being reduced to something grotesque, beast like existence. That they only think of themselves, they only, and whatever comes in their way of acquiring what they want in a selfish manner, they will cruelly dismiss, destroy it. And if that has become the attitude of every individual human being, then all they are doing is shooting themselves in the foot. That's all. There is no other hope, there is no other possibility as such. So the poem offers an unsettling take on Christian morality, suggesting that it is not the stable and reliable force that people believe it to be. The poem clearly alludes to the biblical book of Revelation from the start, in which, put simply, Jesus returns to earth to save the worthy. But is there anybody worthy? According to the Bible, this is meant to happen when humanity reaches the end times, an era of complete war, famine, destruction, and hatred. The poem suggests that the end times are already happening because humanity has lost all sense of morality. Everything positive has been destroyed already. And perhaps that this morality was only an illusion to begin with. Was it ever there? If it was, how was it so easy to just push it aside and get on with one's destructive ways? In the first stanza, the speaker describes the chaos, confusion, and moral weaknesses that have caused things to fall apart. In the second, the poem makes it clear that it's specifically Christian morality that is being undone. Well, basically, it's human morality. In describing this wide ranging destruction, the poem asks whether Christian morality was built on weak foundations in the first place. That is, perhaps humanity was never really moral, but just pretended to be. Hence, the ceremony of innocence is drowned because it was not true. The first stanza's imagery develops this sense of morality being turned upside down. Good and evil, the best and the worst, are no longer the reliable categories that they once were. So it's all becoming blurry because the good cannot really remain good because they have no conviction. And the worst, well, they are preparing to do even worse. So no longer the reliable categories that they once were, replaced by mere anarchy. Mere means something like pure anarchy, pure destruction. There is pure annihilation. There is pure. It's annihilation rising out of unadulterated hatred. Humanity has drenched itself in blood, the blood dimmed tide, suggesting that morality was only ever a ceremony, a performance that conjured the illusion that humankind was innocent. How? Further, the poem suggests that no one, not even Jesus, can remedy this, unfortunately. It suggests that if you're looking for a second coming, look for it in the form of a beast. I don't really think there's going to be any Jesus to come and save your soul. Just to that, just to uh, caution the reader and humanity in general. And the thing is, the sad part is that humanity has drenched itself in blood. It's almost like it's become a ritual, a ceremony, but not of innocence, but of hatred, of bloodshed, a performance that conjured the illusion that humankind was innocent. Further, the one minute, let me separate this. The poem suggests that no one, not even Jesus, can remedy this bleak reality. The biblical book of Revelation predicts a kind of final reckoning in which essentially get what they deserve based on their moral behavior and religious virtues. It indicates that Jesus will come to save those who are worthy of being saved, but the second coming offers no such comfort. I'll take you back to the text part. See, he felt that this would give the individual freedom, for he never made the idea of freedom contingent on democracy. His ceremony of innocence is weirdly juxtaposed with his nihilistic trend, with this nihilistic trend. You remember Eliot himself was also obsessed with in the wasteland with the decay in Eastern Europe, with the innovation of the general European tradition. Yet passionate intensity of the fanatics held no relief for him. In the prophetic version of the second coming, uh, the violent phrase blood dim tide has been variously interpreted by critics. He said that it could be the reference to the coming of fascism. Yeats might not have meant this prophecy so precisely, yet the gruesome tide does represent the upsurge of instinctive violence. Think of the Holocaust, an entire nation rose against a particular community and they believed. So, where is the conviction of the good people? Nobody protested against so many Jews being taken to concentration camps and killed off. Millions of them, millions of them. Yet the gruesome tide does represent the upsurge of instinctive violence. That is, it must have been lying inside the mind. The entire indifference, lack of sympathy, lack of understanding, even forget participation in anything. Thing is, there was no reaction to the mass killings. This is like mass slaughter. It's like, it's almost like a festival of slaughter. So there was no stopping it. Nobody stood up to it. That is where he almost had this foreboding. He almost had this niggling fear that there will be more bloodbath simply because I see the tendency in human beings. I've seen it in one war, and I see that that tendency hasn't really died down. That tendency hasn't really gone away from the human beings. And I'm afraid that it's going to happen again, again, and again. So we have seen the proof in the Second World War. We've seen, it's not that Yeats was there, but we've seen the proof in the Second World War. We've seen the cruelty of war. We've seen the horrors of war in both the world wars. That why should so many nations be dragged into a huge killing ritual? And how could millions of people of so many nations be brainwashed into participating in this killing ritual? But the thing is, it happened everywhere, not only in Europe, particularly in Europe, he's talking about, but everywhere. There was cruelty in Japan, and cruelty in everywhere in the world. There was a total rejection of values that Christ stood for. There was no tolerance. There was zero tolerance. There was zero appreciation. There was zero kindness. That was the problem. Okay, I'll just give my voice a little bit of rest, 5 minutes, and I come back. Okay, now we go on to Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was the last great novelist of the Victorian age, firmly established in his imaginative world of Wessex, its geography, landscape, folkways, agricultural pursuits, and quaint peasantry as a canvas for the drama of his main characters. He was intensely receptive to the experience of his old age. He actually wove into his novels this kind of uh, pastoral background, the peasants, the sheep country, and he showed how, in his novels, how people from this simple, rather naive background, they were snatched away for some time and they were facing some sort of rude awakening. They woke up to reality. We see it in Far from the Madding Crowd. We see it in the Mayor of Casterbridge. We see it in Tess. That sometimes, most of the times, these simple, innocent folks, so to speak, they were taken out of their existing atmosphere, existing living conditions, and either they are propelled or catapulted into something quite different. As we go through tests, we'll see that how a miscommunication or a misleading knowledge, piece of knowledge, information, triggers all that happens in the world, in the life of this innocent girl, Tess. The unique setting and lifestyle at his father's cottage at Dorset cast its magic spell on. Dorset is very, very beautiful. The whole of England is very beautiful. At Dorset cast its magic spell on his childish imagination. As Scott brought up in Edinburgh and the country around it, was excessively impressive when he wrote about the people of this district. And I mean, everybody bases their creative work on, or they draw in inspiration from wherever they grow up. They spend their life or time, particularly where they grow up. Hardy became most creative when he wrote about the somber beauty of the rural Dorset and its people. His novels mostly became a presentation of the conflict between the country surrounding and the new urban civilization. Like I said, that suddenly the values of urban civilization kind of intrudes into the innocent, pristine rural life. And this is what turns everything topsy turvy. Values or absence of them, really. The Industrial Revolution had started destroying the old agricultural England before his eyes. The population was shifting. England came to be a very different place in the late 19th century from what it was in the beginning. And when Queen Victoria started her longest reign, and also remember, it's not only within England, but outside, the empire was expanding at an exponential rate. England was becoming very, very powerful abroad as well. And not only the disintegration of the old social and economic structure that bothered him, but the disintegration of ideas and faith and values also left a great impact on him. The rational ideas of 18th century had merged with the new romantic spirit of rebellion against convention and shattered the basic belief, religious, social, and political. So this was really an age of transition, and Hardy's sensitive mind, along with the beauty of meadow, heath, blue sky, openness, open air, reflects the tragic pathos of humanity, all that humanity has lost, its ardent craving for happiness and contradictions of human nature itself. So, a great emotional force works behind every story, and you'll see most of Hardy's writings, novels, like many of his contemporaries, they have they go through this tremendous kind of emotional upheaval, a cycle, till they either come to terms with it or they meet a tragic end, as we will see at the end of Tess. His vision is almost wholly tragic, though he shares the immense creative energy of great Victorian novelists. If there is a certain amount of bleakness, there's a certain feeling of loss in almost all his novels. There's a bit of cynicism, underlying cynicism, that this didn't have to happen like this. This didn't have to end like this. But unfortunately, it did, simply because of the circumstances. Many times we see the main protagonist is either misunderstood or is misled or is a very sad, sorry victim of circumstances and is often helpless against the powers that be. We'll see in the case of Tess that she's first misled into thinking that she's part of a family who are very rich, and she goes to live with them only to be disillusioned, to find out that that's not it. And what does she just has to take up a job to survive, and is seduced by the son of the people she's working where she's working, and she has a child, she loses it, and then she meets somebody else, and it's just by chance that her husband does not see her confession. And then later on, when she reveals her past, he misunderstands and he goes away. He goes away, he's unable to forgive her. But the thing is, she was not, she was really a victim of circumstances. She was sent to live with the D'Urbervilles only to be told that this whole thing was a made up situation. And then she goes to work, then she's seduced by the son. She's kind of helpless. She's a very strong character. She's full of integrity. But it doesn't really help her. It doesn't really serve any purpose in the novel or in the protagonist's journey. So we finally see her being executed for a revenge that she took. She's supposed to have taken against the man who really ruined his life. I mean, probably in the modern days, the thoughts could have been given that this is a crime of passion, or the perpetrator of the crime has been more sinned against than sinning. But that doesn't really happen, and she's executed. She just has to pay with her life for doing, for being driven to do what she did. He's totally unaware, Hardy is, he shares the creative energy of the Victorian novelists. He's totally unaware of the ironic social sin. He's not like the others. And sometimes, unlike Dickens, who shows a zestful faith in human nature, Hardy ends up on a bleaker note, almost always. He creates an entirely new world of imagination of his own, and you'll see that his dialogues are very sharp, very passionate. He views the novel as a living organism, in which all component parts such as plot, dialogue, character, scenery are properly framed together to make it a complete harmonious building, harmonious structure. And Hardy himself had a sort of an unhappy marriage, and it's very strange that most of these creative people, like T.S. Eliot, they had they had partners who were sort of mentally unbalanced, or they were married to invalid people physically. They had rejections in their life, tremendous amount of rejections. They fought uh, adverse situations. But when Hardy's wife died unexpectedly, she left Hardy in remorse and grief. His second marriage with Florence Emily Dugdale became more peaceful and orderly. So Hardy, we know that he's known both for his poetry and as well as uh, his novels. No one can deny the fascinating influence of nature on the thoughts of poets, right from the time of Chaucer to present day. The Romantic revival in England reminds us of the chief worshipper of nature, William Wordsworth, who always encouraged a return to nature, to be one with nature, to find peace in nature, away from human company. Wordsworth, well, he applauded nature's justice and took it as his guide, nurse, and sheet anchor of life. But Hardy's vision was completely different. Apart from being a kind and generous mother, the central dogma of his faith is that nature is the agent of cruelty, indifference, caprice, and soullessness. See, nature, as Hardy saw it, takes her own course. She doesn't adapt herself to human situations. And Hardy depicts nature as as an insensible to the feeling of man, and it gets sort of fiendish delight in slaying simple human beings. Egdon Heath itself becomes symbolic of the doom of man. The description of the heath is loaded with a philosophy inspired by its somber elemental grandeur. At the same time, it's a very bleak, gloomy vastness in which every living thing seems to be swallowed up in the depth of the centuries. It can remain witness to a lot of misery, to a lot of doubts, angst, sufferings. Tess's purity and virginity is taken advantage of by Alec in the very lap of nature, and nature witnesses the whole act silently. What Alec is doing to Tess is against natural order. He's abusing her sexually. But nature is quite indifferent. Darkness and silence ruled everywhere around. Above them rose the primeval years and oaks of the chase. About them stole the hopping rabbits and hare. But might some say, where was Tessa's guardian angel? Nobody came to protect her. She was a very thorough, believing Christian. So nobody. The saddest part is that nature remains a quiet, a dumb witness to every kind of crime, and there is no retribution as such. from nature or from the divine unless the human being himself or herself takes the law in his or her own hands, as Tess did for Alec. And we often see that Alec, he seemed to have changed his ways towards the end before Tess murders him. But he causes disruption, he causes absolute mayhem in Tess's life. Something that a very a stronger woman with stronger intuitions or stronger sense of purpose would have dealt with it in a very different way. Hardy uses landscape as a kind of a contrast, now grimly smiling, now frankly menacing. Nature not only prepares the pathetic atmosphere in which the characters come and go, it also influences the moods and actions of Hardy's human characters. To realize the self sacrificing love of Mary South in the woodland, one must be accustomed with the spell of the brooding woods. It's almost like nature, by remaining silent, is being an accomplice to what to the unjust actions of the perpetrators of crime, and it remains a silent witness, a mute dumb witness to the sufferings of the innocent human. In Tess, nature's paradigm changes, the emotional changes in Tess's life. The secluded valley of Backmoor changes its atmosphere and climate when Tess, being happy, enters into the silent vale of great dairies. Lord David Cecil aptly focuses on this man and nature relationship. Nature, first of all, played a larger part in Hardy's books than in those of any other English novelist. Well, I wouldn't totally agree with that because nature has really played a very big role in a lot of novelists. But here, yes, very prominently. It is not just the background of his drama, but a leading character in it. Sometimes it exercises an active influence on the course of events. More often, it's a spiritual agent, coloring the mood and shaping the disposition of human beings. The huge bleak darkness of Egdon Heath dominates the lives of the characters in The Return of the Native, infusing into them its grandeur and its melancholy. Nature, who's cruel and indifferent, acts as a spiritual agent, and the pictures of nature in Hardy's novels are graphic. It vividly expresses his intense love for the external beauties of nature, but at the same time, somebody who can be so beautifully beautiful outside can remain quite. Nature's attitude seems to be that look, I take my own course. Everything is like clockwork, everything happens in order. You are human, you are the ones who break the order, you are the one who disrupts. So there's nothing I can do about it. That is nature's attitude. So he has this intense love for the beauties of nature. He depicted innumerable descriptions of birds, grass, flowers, gardens, bridges, and some of the most remarkable descriptions like that in Knockham Hill leave a still greater scope. Every little detail in his native district, every single wood which feels the warmth and cold of the seasons, every bare upland where the furrow of a Roman road was straight, being his canvas when he just painted his masterpiece. Now, what exactly has been his philosophy of life? There's been an ironic contrast between man's aspirations and performance, between his desire and his compulsive emotions. between the illusions of pride and the realities of self governance. Like Aristotle's tragic hero, um, Hardy's characters get the poetic justice for their own past ordeals. His plots twist at the revelation of a past action that unfolds the old secret at a critical juncture. A pair of blue eyes, far from the madding crowd, Mayor of Casterbridge, and novels which tackle this theme and by this method. In Tess, we see a pure woman, an innocent woman, is being seduced, is being taken advantage of, who is made for love, happiness, fulfillment, just a normal, happy life. She's denied it all. She loses a child, she's seduced, she's betrayed by her first lover. She loses a child, and then when he goes to look for happiness, or when he finds happiness, when he finally breaks away from her past and tries to find happiness, she's able to describe her past to her lover, but she's misunderstood. She's not even misunderstood, it's just that her lover feels there's an immense amount of indifference in him, lack of feeling, hardness, harshness in him. And she's she goes to look for something positive, and yet she's kind of sucked into into a situation which she finds it very difficult to come out of. And the picture when she goes to Derbyfield, the picture of the sordid household is the main theme of the next chapter. Mr. Don Derbyfield and his wife, they are found drunk. Her first introduction is to the drunk couple. They're found drunk in an unlicensed public house, and Tess, being their daughter, has grown up in this household between. So she wants to get away from this. She wants to go out of this, probably change her situation. So she goes to the Overfields, but she doesn't really, fortune is not really waiting for her there. She really becomes a poultry girl in D'Urberville's. Probably she didn't even know any better than that. She probably wouldn't even see. She was a very simple girl, looking with simple aspirations, looking for simple happiness. It doesn't really happen. She's attacked by another girl. Alec follows her, and in a night excursion to tease, a girl called Cardutch attacks Tess. Alec, on his horseback, rescues her, and she thinks that Alec is her rescuer, but he isn't. He's really a two faced guy who repeatedly does mislead her. The fall of Tess is inevitable as she's only 17 and half believed that Alec loves her. She's also under the illusion that the person who seduced her actually loves her. He didn't. He was simply having a good time. The incident brings appalling misery and misfortune into her life, and she knows that it happens because of her ignorance, as she was a child when she left. Her innocence is constantly put to test, and she loses her baby, a few months old, and it's very sad to see the baptism and the subsequent burial happens almost at the same time. The other thing is she wants to be true. She wants to confess her past, but it doesn't happen when she tries to. When she marries uh, Angel, sorry, when he marries her husband, who goes away, she tries to be truthful. She tries to be honest. She tries to be transparent, but she's misunderstood. And Angel leaves. He just abandons her. Nobody really seems to understand her isolation. Nobody seems to understand her plight. That she's been seduced, she's been taken advantage of, she's lost a baby. She's sees she the husband really wants to see her as an untainted, spotless woman. And she tries to convince the her in-laws side, her husband's side, that she really was taken advantage of. She was not really an active participant in it. When we look at the character of Tess, we see that she's intelligent, she's strikingly attractive, she's distinguished, and she's very morally sound. That's why she confesses her past affair. Unfortunately, it doesn't reach her husband. So she has deep moral sensitivity and passionate intensity. She's undisputably the central character of the novel that bears her name, but she's also more than a distinctive individual. Hardy makes her into somewhat of a mystic heroine. Her name, formerly Teresa, recalls Saint Teresa of Avila, another martyr whose vision of higher reality cost her her life. Other characters often refer to Tess in mythical terms, and when Angel calls her a daughter of nature in chapter 18, or refers to her by the Greek mythological names Artemis and Demeter in chapter 20, the narrator himself sometimes describes Tess as more than an individual woman, but as something closer to a mythical incarnation of womanhood. Somebody says that her eyes are neither black nor blue, nor grey nor violet, rather all these shades together, like an almost standard woman. So her story may be a standard story representing a deeper and larger experience than that of a single individual. In part, Tess represents the changing role of the agricultural workers in England in the late 19th century, possessing an education that her unschooled parents lack. Since that was also another problem because her parents were unschooled, they couldn't really give her a proper grooming. They couldn't really give her insights into what the world might really be. Possessing an education that her unschooled parents lack, in the since she has passed the sixth standard of the national schools, Tess does not quite fit into the folk culture of her predecessors. But financial constraints keep her from rising to higher station in life. She belongs in that higher world emotionally, morally, even spiritually. She ranks higher than the circumstances into which she's born. But the thing is, it doesn't really pay off. There is aristocracy in Tessa's blood, visible in her graceful beauty, yes. Yet she's forced to work as a farmhand and a milkmaid. So when she tries to express her joy by singing lower class folk ballads in the beginning part of the novel, they do not satisfy her because she's not meant for that. She's meant for something more refined. She seems not quite comfortable with those popular songs, but on the other hand, her diction, while more polished than her mother's, is not quite up to the test of the Alex or the Angels. So she's in between both society and culture. So thus, Tess is a symbol of unclear and unstable notions of class in the 18th century Britain, where old family lines claimed their earlier glamour, but where cold economic realities made sheer wealth more important than inner nobility. And beyond her social symbolism, Tess represents fallen humanity in a religious sense. As the frequent biblical allusions in the novel remind us that she is she's caught in between this, I wouldn't call it a dilemma. She's caught in between her own nobility and the not so noble circumstances. So it could be that by being seduced by Alec, she represents the original sin, hence the degraded state in which all humans live, even when Tess herself, after killing Prince or succumbing to Alec, they do not wholly or directly, they are not directly or wholly responsible for the sins for which they are punished. This torment represents the who is punished actually. Tess is executed. She is the myth of the human who suffers for crimes that are not her own and lives a life more degraded than she deserves. There is an unfair meting out of justice. So let's take a look at the character of Alec. He's a 24-year-old man, heir to fortune and bearer of a name that his father purchased. Alec is the nemesis and downfall of Tessa's life. His first name, Alexander, suggests that, well, he's a conqueror, he's great, who seizes what he wants, regardless of moral propriety. Whether it's right or wrong, he thinks that he feels very entitled, yet he's more slippery than a grand conqueror. His full last name, Stoke, Duberville symbolizes that the split character of his family, whose origins are humbler than their pretensions of grandeur. After all, Stokes is a blunt and inelegant name. Indeed, the divided and it's full of duplicity. Duplicitous character of Alec is evident to the very end of the novel when he quickly abandons his newfound Christian faith upon re-meeting Tess. He's again willing to seduce. It is hard to believe that he holds his religion or anything else as something sacred. There is nothing sacred about him. He doesn't even have that kind of strength of character. He simply gives in to his own desires, his own temptations. His supposed conversion may only be a new role he's playing. He's pretending all the time. This duplicity of character is so intense in Alec, and its consequences for Tess so severe. So Tess is constantly at the receiving end. See, she's being seduced by Alec. She has a child. She is the bearer of the consequences of somebody else's sin. She's the sufferer. It's almost like she bears the cross for, it's almost like Christ bearing the cross of everybody else's sin. She is the innocent victim of somebody else's wrongdoing. That he becomes, Alec is a diabolical character. He's the devil that tempts Tess into committing the original sin, for which she suffers and he gets away until the very end when Tess murders him. The first part of his surname conjures association with fiery energies, as in the stoking of a furnace or the flames of hell. He wields a pitchfork. It's almost like the devil with his pitchfork while addressing Tess early in the novel. And when he seduces her as the serpent in Genesis seduced Eve, additionally, like the famous depiction of Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost, Alec does not try to hide his bad qualities. He says that I revel in my bad qualities, in my sinful intentions. He bluntly tells Tess that I suppose I'm a bad fellow, a damn bad fellow. I was born bad, and I have lived bad, and I shall die bad, in all probability. And he has no regrets, no remorse for what he is and what he's doing. There is very blatant acceptance in this admission and no shame, no remorse. Some readers feel Alec is too wicked to be believable, but like Tess herself, he represents a larger moral principle rather than a real individual man. Like Satan, he symbolizes the base forces of life that drive a person away from moral perfection and greatness. And let's take a look at Angel Clare. He is a free thinking son born into the family of provincial parson and determined to set himself up as a farmer instead of going to Cambridge like his conformist brothers. Angel represents a rebellious striving toward personal vision of goodness. He is a secularist who yearns to work for honor and glory of man rather than the honor and glory of God in a more distant world. In a typical young 19th century progressive person, Angel sees human society as a thing to be remolded and improved. As his name in French, close to bright angel, suggests, Angel is not quite of this world, but floats above it in a transcendent sphere of his own. The narrator says that Angel shines rather than burns. Unlike Alec, Alec has the ugly flame of desire, whereas Angel shines and he's closer to the intellectually aloof poet. His love for Tess may be abstract, as we guess when he calls her daughter of nature or Demeter. Tess may be more an archetype or ideal to him than a flesh and blood woman with a complicated life. Hence, he finds it difficult to accept that Tess has actually had a past so tainted, which was not her fault, but it takes him very long to accept it and forgive Tess. So Angel awakens to the actual complexities of real world morality after his failure in prison, and only then he realizes that he's been unfair to Tess. His moral system is readjusted as he's brought down to earth. Ironically, it is not the angel who guides the human in this novel, but the human who instructs the angel, although at the cost of her own life. So the tragedy of the whole story is that there is the devil, the bad man, seducing the good human. The good human meets the good angel, but the good angel is unable to salvage, to rescue. The good angel flies away, goes away, only to return to find her in very tragic circumstances from which she's absolutely unable to extract herself. So Tess falls a victim, remains a victim, and dies a victim. Although she has finally, at the end, she has managed to create some sense of justice for herself by murdering Alec, putting an end to Satan. But in the process, she has to sacrifice her life. So there is the seventh phase of fulfillment with angels return from Brazil. And sometimes the readers feel that, okay, Angel has returned and his restless effort to reach Tess for reconciliation, but then it's too late, because financial and morally stressed Tess is now Alex's mistress. Deeply disturbed and distressed, Tess cannot bear Angel's departure from her door, and she finds out that Alec is responsible for her misfortune. So, time and time again, this villain has lured her away or created a situation that has come in the way of her happiness. So, right at the end, she's reunited by her husband, and she puts an end to her misery the way only she knows how to do it, and it costs her her life. And right at the end, the Angel and Tessa's sister, Lisa, they go to the city of Wintoncester to witness the climax of Tessa's tragedy. It is an entire journey, a tragic journey of Tess. We see her as a bright, beautiful, attractive woman with all the angelic qualities that would have made her a very good partner for Angel. Teresa, she's got a very saintly nature when we see her first. She's too innocent. She's too good a person. She's too naive a person. She's too pure. Hence, her fall is horrific. And ultimately, she's unable, she does put an end to her misery, but ultimately, she is unable to extricate herself from the murky situation that Alec has created for her. And she's executed in the city prison, puts an end to all her misery. So he makes his reader's heart swollen with grief by the spectacle of a tender and lovable woman, exhausted by ill luck, committing murder and paying the extreme penalty. It is all too unjust. But the problem is, it seems to be her destiny which takes its own course, and she has to live the way she was destined to do. She is free and independent, and it is her innocence and ignorance which accelerate her tragedy. So Hardy has shown the readers a distinct comparison between the finer human being. She's too fine a human being to even suspect Alex's intentions. Her parents they lack finesse, they lack education, but she's different. She's different from the milkmaids, she's different from the peasants, she's very different. And it's almost like she pays the price, a very heavy price, for being different. Had she been like any other peasant woman, she would have just kept quiet and not confessed her past. Those days people didn't really talk about their giving into temptation or being seduced or having any kind of physical intimacy before marriage. It happened, you've had a baby, just keep shut and get on with life. But she didn't do it. She wanted to be truthful, she wanted to be honest, she wanted to come clean. And for that she pays a price. She loses the man she married, who goes away from her only to leave her in further distress. And in right at the end, when the executioner comes, Angel Clare actually does love her, but it is to no avail. He tells her, let her finish her sleep, and Angel whispered pleadingly. And then at last she awakes, and what is it, Angel? She says, that have they come for me? Yes, dearest, they have come. It is as it should be, she murmurs, Angel. I'm almost glad. This happiness could not have lasted. Anyway, it was too much. She almost resigns herself to the fact that she has been good, but she doesn't deserve any happiness. So the sooner this life ends, the better. She has managed to snatch a little bit of happiness out of her prolonged misfortune. So do you have any, we stop here, do we have any questions on this? Or the Orange Yates? You've done three monologues of Robert Browning. So, should refer to the three monologues: Last Duchess, Porphyria's Lover, and The Last Ride Together. Stick to that. Okay, so we stop here today, and I shall see you not next weekend, but the weekend after. Good luck with your exams. Don't panic. Read your questions carefully. 10 marks. I think it was there in the WhatsApp message. I don't know. The 10 marks each question. That was quite clear. Somebody's replied 10 marks for each question. This has been coming up. This has been coming up quite frequently because somewhere it says 25 marks and somewhere it says 10 marks. Let me just come back to this. Can I finish this session? I shall reply to you on WhatsApp. 25, sorry, my mistake. Okay, I shall come back to this. I can see this. Yes, let me come back to this. I'll send you a WhatsApp message on the group. Look for my message. Okay, goodbye. See you in 2 weeks.